Hi, so last week I participated in the Spookathon readathon, which is like a week-long readathon with 5 challenges. The general idea is to read spooky books, which I kind of did and kind of didn't, but let me tell you about the books I read and you can decide for yourself whether they were spooky enough. So the first book I read during the readathon was The Blackbird Season by Kate Moretti. I read this because it is one, a thriller, which was the first challenge, and also it has purple on the cover, which is the second challenge, and also it was available as an audiobook from the library, so I could read it straight away and I could listen to it during my commute, which, given I had very little time for this readathon, was a crucial factor. So the Blackbird Season is told through multiple perspectives, and I will say it's a little bit confusing because it's told in third person, but there was a different narrator for each person, and I would always get confused when they would refer to themselves in the third person. I'd be like, hang on, why are you talking about yourself? It is something that I got used to, but it was a little bit odd. So one of these perspectives is this guy called Nate, and he is a teacher who's very involved with his teenage students. He cares a lot for them, but one of these students, something bad has happened to them, and you're kind of left throughout the story questioning whether he really did this bad stuff. And you also follow it from another teacher that's a good friend of his and his wife, who is struggling to raise their autistic son, and those two women are also questioning whether he really did these things that he's been accused of. And one of the themes the story tries to explore is the idea that his life has kind of been torn apart by these accusations, which I struggled with a little bit because his life was already a bit of a mess because he wasn't very supportive of his wife and they didn't communicate. And to be honest, almost every thriller I read, I get really frustrated that there's these relationships. And why don't people communicate? I think whenever I read these books, I start being worried that this is what everybody's relationships are like, that they don't communicate, and it makes me really sad for the world. Honestly, if you're going to get married to someone, just communicate with them, and then you won't get into these ridiculous situations. Anyway, back to talking about the book. I would say that it wasn't really very thrillery because I never really felt like any of the characters were particularly in danger. Also, the one character that probably could be considered to be in danger, you don't really get much from their perspective, and it's kind of set up so you don't feel a lot of empathy for her, even though you probably should feel a lot of empathy for her, which is another thing which makes me conflicted about this story, is that it deals with rape and rape accusations, and I'm not sure I feel like it was dealt with in the best way. But on the other side of things, I did find the story interesting. It was easy to pay attention to. And even when the characters did stupid things, it was like logical stupid. And also, I don't really know, but I suspect that the part of the story that was about this couple struggling with their son's autism and how to accept him being different was probably quite realistic. But obviously that's not something I have experience with, so I can't really comment. So overall, some good bits and some questionable bits. So then the second book I read was Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So this is the third book in the Illuminae files, and it's all told in multimedia, different kind of like email logs and video transcriptions. So obviously, since this was the third book in the series, I had a pretty clear idea of what it was going to be like, and it totally met my expectations. Although maybe I would say I expected things to be much crazier at the end, like scientifically, like more science fiction-y, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was epic at the end, but I just thought it might be epic in a kind of a Gemini way, which was the second book. But anyway, if you haven't heard about this trilogy, which would be very strange because it's very popular on BookTube, this tells the story of this illegal mining planet that gets attacked. They end up on the run. Each story essentially follows a different couple. There's always like a low-grade romance. I guess what I will say is this book does follow like a new couple, but you don't really get that much of them because we're also still following some of the original characters as well. So I do feel that maybe one option would have been to have cut out a lot of the stuff with the older characters from the previous books and focus more on the newer characters. What that would have done is let this be a much shorter book, because this is 615 pages, which is very long, and I did feel like it was a bit slow in some bits, like it took quite a long bit of time to get going, and then the kind of the final battle was quite long and drawn out, and I don't feel like that needed to be that long. And I kind of feel like maybe if we'd focused on the new characters, then the old ones reappearing would have been like more of a shocking surprise, and then you could have found out how they got there rather than following along with them. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an author. Not yet. But anyway, I also, you can tell from the black sections, if you have read this series, we also get a lot of Aiden, who is the AI in the series, and he's definitely my favorite character. A lot of people really love Aiden, and really, he deserves to be liked. I also really like the way this story explores the humanity of people on both sides of the battle, rather than making one side kind of like this faceless enemy. So I did give this 4 stars because I did find it very entertaining, and it just got quite exciting and epic in bits, and there was some definite good plot points, and I really enjoyed all the characters. There's just a lot of things I really liked. So this book does cover me for a book set in a different time, because this is set in 2075, I believe. I could potentially also have it cover a book with pictures. Oh, I'm trying to show you pictures, but I'm not good at it. There are actually more picture-y pictures. Actually, let's show you, oh, spoilers. Hard to show you the really good pictures without showing you spoilers. But it does have some of Hannah, if you know Hannah. It does have some like comic book type bits. Here's some pictures, but we're not going to count it for the pictures challenge. I have another book here, which means I may as well talk about it now, even though the pictures challenge is the last one, but we'll jump ahead. So I also read Emily the Strange, The Lost Days, which is actually the first book in a series. Who knew? And this book has a bunch of pictures. Often they're spoilery pictures, but we could show you this one. It has a bunch of pictures in it. Pretty much all the way through it's got random pictures, because it's pretty much Emily the Strange's, oh, that's hard to say, Emily the Strange's diary, kind of while she has woken up in this strange town and she has amnesia. She doesn't know who she is or why she's there, and she's, I don't know, sleeping in this refrigerator box out the back of this cafe. It's definitely a very strange book. She often writes weird lists of things, or just like kind of scripts out the dialogue. And there's not chapters, it always just starts with like later, which I did feel a bit weird, because I'm always like, oh, just read another chapter, but the laters are quite often, so they don't feel like chapters. So then I'd be like, oh, just read another chapter. Oh, hang on, it doesn't really have chapters. I would say that I couldn't really decide, like, this is marked in Goodreads as a young adult book, but it felt a little bit middle grade, although there's some bits that probably aren't quite middle grade. No, I would actually say in some ways it's very similar to Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. It's very dark, doesn't have quite the same wordplay and beautiful writing. The writing is pretty basic, but I think if you like Emily the Strange's, oh, that's so hard to say. If you like Emily the Strange's aesthetic, then you will probably like this book, if you don't mind the fact that it's a little bit simple. It was pretty fun trying to figure out alongside Emily what was actually going on. Okay, so let's jump back to the challenge before that, which was to read a book with a spooky word in the title. And for this, I listened to the audiobook of We Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. So this story is set in this world where on the day that you're going to die, you get a phone call early in the morning, just after midnight, telling you, hey, you're going to die today. And there's nothing you can do to change that. You just have to live out your last day. And there's a bunch of different systems set up to help people get through that last day and like have their funeral and have some final experiences. And one of the other things that is there is this app called Last Friend, where people who don't really have people to spend the day with can meet up with a last friend on the app and have some company for their last day. So we follow two guys, one is Mateo and another one is Rufus, and for different reasons they are alone on their last day, so they end up meeting up. And I really enjoyed their friendship and also the friendship that they have with their friends before they meet up with each other, because they're not really alone because they're friendless. They also have some friends, and I just thought the theme of friendship was so strong through the story. It was definitely some very sad bits, thinking about what it would be like to have to say goodbye to all your friends on your last day. And of course also through the whole story you're kind of waiting to find out how they actually die, because the title gives it away, they do both die at the end. So I didn't think that this story was amazing. There's never really any explanation of how this deathcast phone call works, like how they know that you're going to die on that day. That's not explained at all. It's more about the experience of these guys going through their last day. And personally, I was also a little bit disappointed in the romance element. I just think it wasn't necessary. But I will say, like, I'm generally just not into romance. That might just be a personal preference. But I just thought that the whole theme of friendship was so strong that I would have been quite happy for the whole book to just have been about friendship. And I don't think that romance should trump friendship. And I feel like it almost kind of implied that it does. I don't know. I think it's just me being anti-romance. I just didn't feel like either of the characters needed a romance to get through the day. But anyway, yeah, I guess my summary is nothing amazing, but it was quite a little heartwarming tale. And I didn't mind it. I quite liked both the characters, so it was nice to hang out with them on their last day. So that does cover all the challenges. I do also want to count, even though I know the point of this readathon is not to read a certain number of books, I did kind of read 5 books, because even though I started it a little bit before the start of the readathon, I did read or listen to most of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood during the Spookathon as well, so I think it should count, even though it doesn't actually fit under any of the challenges. I guess you could count it as a book set in a different time, since it is set, I think, kind of in the early 80s, although then I wouldn't have one for, then I'd have to shuffle everything and nothing would work. Anyway, The Handmaid's Tale is something that I listened to during the Spookathon. I mainly read this because I know the TV series came out recently and everyone was talking about it. Not so much now, but people were talking about it, and I wanted to be in the know about what the story was. Even though I had a strong suspicion that the writing style would not be for me, which is why I got it on the audiobook, because it's easier to listen to things that aren't that enjoyable to you than it is to read them physically, because at least you can do something else to keep yourself kind of entertained at the same time. Mostly I was driving or walking, but you know, I got to play some Pokemon while I listened to this, which was lucky, because I was correct. The writing style was not for me at all. It's so like descriptive, and the main character never really comes out and says what is really happening. It's always like so vague and like focusing on like not the main action, and like a lot of her thoughts about what's happening rather than just like tell me what's happening. It also jumped around in time a lot, which might have been worse in audiobook form, because I do find with audiobooks it's a bit harder to keep track of different time shifts. Actually, this was an element of the Blackbird season as well, because in the Blackbird season it was jumping around in time and I just get so lost. Maybe it's me, but both of these books I would struggle a little bit to be like, wait, what time are we in now? So to explain what The Handmaid's Tale is, for those of you who don't know, it's like a dystopian future where women have had everything, like all their rights taken away from them, and they're now just assigned to be wives to different men. primarily men who have a particular status, and there's different classes of wives, and these handmaids are the wives that are supposed to be fertile and able to have children, and they're there to service their men sexually, but not for fun, just for procreation. And there's all these like very strict rules about not communicating with other people except for in very specific ways. But there's also this like underground element where people are obviously breaking the rules, because if you try to lock humans into these stupid, ridiculous ideas of no sex and no fun, it's never gonna work. So it's exploring kind of this idea of this hugely sexist society, and I do think the ideas that it's trying to explore are very valid, but overall the writing style just took it out for me. I couldn't do it. It just so draggy, not much action, or when there was action, I just didn't really care about the main character. I don't know if it was the narrator or just the way that she talked made me not really like the main character, even though I can't really think why not. I guess the summary is that I suspected this wasn't a book for me, and I was right. But at least now, if I hear someone talking about The Handmaid's Tale, I now know what happened in it. I think if you like very conceptual stories with a lot of just I guess if you like stories that explore ideas rather than having much of a plot, and you don't mind things that jump around in time, then I think you might like this. If you want something very feminist and conceptual that's also a dystopia, maybe then you'll like it. If you like really descriptive stuff. It's been a long time saying that. Anyway, I didn't really like it. So that was my Spookathon. I think I'm pretty happy with the amount that I read, given that I was pretty busy with work and life and all that stuff last week. If you have read any of the books that I talked about today, then I'd love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Or if you did the Spookathon, then I would love to know what you read. If you filmed a wrap up, then let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.